So I think all this adds up to a new world where the certainties of local government services, that's what we did, wasn't it? We provided services. And the silos that providing those services created have disappeared. We're not about providing services in that old-fashioned sense. We're about the problem solving. We're about finding different ways of joining up different teams within the council and beyond to do that. Now, this is all hazy. This is all uncertain. It's all chaotic in a respect, and I was in some respects. And I was having this discussion with my with my leader the other day. This is a chaotic picture of the role of local government. You can't be certain about sort of you structure it this way, you give them a target to do that, you spend X pounds on it, and we can just let them get off and run. But it's good chaos, because it provides opportunities for thinking differently and doing things differently. A couple of examples of what we've done. And none of this is new in a sense. But we have, for example, a major £100 million development in the centre of Winchester. Quite controversial for design reasons, reasons of people saying, will it sort of shift the shops out of the high street to this new development and so on and so forth. And to help plan that new development and involve our communities, we didn't just have the sort of community meetings with a bunch of people in suits standing up and showing master plans. We had artists come in. And we had a really good session actually in one of the car parks that will be built on, where we put up a marquee for a whole week in the end. And we got people to come in and paint pictures and work with artists to draw things. We took those artists out to schools to say, what do you want as the kids who will actually grow up to use this space? What do you want from this development? And it came up with some really interesting, slightly mad ideas. There was one school where they were keen on a zoo being in the middle of this development, which is probably not feasible. But it sort of got ideas going, and we had some really interesting discussions with the developers about how things could work differently, how the space could work differently, and so on and so forth. Another project we're doing jointly with the county, with our museum service, is working with older people on memories projects, those with dementia and incipient dementia, talking about memories and oral history projects. That's another element of the arts, of course. That's using our museum service. Just to plug them into saying, well, okay, let's make them feel involved. Let's take them somewhere with other groups of people to talk about things and make them feel valued. Again, not a new idea, and there are others that have done it, but it's just an example of where you can think differently about how you're going to solve a problem of social isolation. And the one I really like is bollards. You'll recognise that. That's on a bollard in the square in Winchester, just outside the cathedral. Some of you may know it. And we commissioned a local group of artists to paint bollards in the style of various different artists. And we got businesses to sponsor those. It's £400 a bollard. We've got some individuals who've sponsored bollards, and we've got everything from Da Vinci to Magritte, we decided. I'm not a cultural person. You know the one I mean, the blokes with bowler hats. Klimt and people like that, Mondrian, a real diversity of artists, style of artists represented on bollards. Now, why do that? At £400 a time, why do that? It's got people, visitors, local people coming into the square, spending time in the cafes there, so they're making money. It's got us talked about. It's more of the marketing we can do. It's created that sense of place just by getting a bunch of artists to do something really, really daft. Paint classical works of art on bollards. And that's the sort of thing which can help bring artists into a challenging issue of economic development, where the old answer might have been, well, okay, maybe we should improve the paving or something like that. But if we want economic development and those businesses to be successful, we need more parking spaces, or we need to reduce parking costs, or we need to do a bit of advertising. No, we don't. We need some bollards. That's helped. That's really made a difference. So, to conclude, that's another example. Sorry, that's a bollard where we ticked several boxes. What you've got there is a bunch of school kids from one of our council estates with their councillors and one of our museums officers and one of the artists, indeed, who's been involved on the right. And the kids painted their own bollard, but to get them involved in doing that and Winchester's history, we got them in the City Museum just behind, looking at some of the Roman mosaics we've got in there. And you can't really see the detail on there, but go to the square in Winchester and see it. It's done in the style of a Roman mosaic. You can all see all the little Tesla, I think they're called, aren't they? The little stones done. And those kids did it. Kids from one of our more challenging primary schools in one of our more challenging estates, and even Winchester has challenging estates, got involved in a project. They now take their mums and dads along proudly to show them what they did. So that was a really good little project which ticked all sorts of boxes and has left us with a nice bit of artwork as well. So I want to finish with what I think are the sort of top tips for arts and culture moving forward. Learn the language. Everything I've been saying about how we should work, we talk about outcomes, we talk about the contribution we can make to place, to character, identity. This shifting role of local government, this idea of solving problems. You need to start thinking and understanding that context and start sort of, in a sense, exploiting the chaos and uncertainty that's probably in the minds of a lot of members and chief execs as this sort of notion of what the local council is for starts shifting. You need to understand how we spend. This move towards commissioning of services. We don't buy services anymore. We don't buy activity when we spend money. We buy outcomes, so it's back to the language point again. And we spend money increasingly saying what we want to deliver is not a 3% increase in the turnaround of voids or a 5% increase over the next 3 years in the number of people in an area who say they feel engaged in community life. We buy things which are better for our communities, and we spend money in that way. So that's another part of the language, in a sense. You guys are probably pretty good at this already, but thinking laterally, how can arts, culture contribute to what you're trying to achieve in a town, in a village, in a city, in the countryside? The phrase I scribbled down here, which I have used before actually, it's no longer art for art's sake. Is it art for job's sake or for learning's sake? Where can art, culture, however we define it, fit into making a difference to school kids who are having a problem learning, or kids who are otherwise on the street causing problems, or older people, or whatever it might be, the economy, so on and so forth? You, of course, have to be ready to quantify the benefits of what you do, because we still, in councils, work on measurements. People want to know what success looks like. It needn't be as statistical as it has been in the past. Success is not that turnaround in voids, that increased number of restaurant inspections by the environmental health team. But it is measured in terms of quantifiable things still, what people, what visitors think about the place, the community that they live in. And you need to be ready to see how you can demonstrate that with the project that you're doing. And then finally, with a nod to our colleague in the audience here, remember that this is a political game. It's an unfriendly world out there for all of us. You have to justify what you do. I have to justify what I do. Politicians have to justify what they do, in a sense, in terms of the language of politics, in terms of the change it's going to make, because we're all driven ultimately by elected members who, of course, are there for the good of their communities, but they're also there to make sure that they're elected members for another 4 years, and ideally their party is in control as well. That means you have to think in terms of making a case for how you can help achieve political objectives as well as community objectives, and the two will inevitably be closely tied up. What's the priority in this particularly marginal ward? How can you help contribute? You have to basically be nakedly political in what you do, in trying to find and seize opportunities to work. And artists have always been political. Holbein, when he painted Henry VIII, that was a political painting because it was trying to get a message across. Even through to some of our modern playwrights who are extremely political in what they do. They're the things I think you ought to think about as artists. Some of that will be entirely familiar to you. Hopefully some of it will be new. I think what I'd encourage you to do is tie it all together and learn this new direction for councils, this new language. Because if you do, I think it becomes pretty clear that if done right, then we can make a case for the arts not at all being a luxury, but being an absolutely essential way of achieving real change in communities. Thank you. and I've ended with a bollards picture as well. There's a whole string of commissioned bollards.